Attention all pilots! Attention all pilots! Prepare for takeoff. This is not a drill.
It's an ambush. All Republic forces prepare for attack. Those cruisers are key strategic assets. If you can keep the Separatists off them, they'll deal out serious damage. Our cruisers are gone, but the battle can still be won. Strategic calculations can't beat know-how and ingenuity.
Hello pilots, and welcome to the first installment of the Starfighter Community Logs. Since this is the first transmission, let me get you up to speed what the community logs are all about and why I came up with them in the first place. Well, if you are like me, a fan of all things Starfighter and Star Wars Battlefront II, you will of course be fully aware the Starfighter game modes haven't been updated since the addition of Hero Starfighters. If you just look at Starfighter Assault, it basically hasn't seen any additions since Battlefront II's launch 2 years ago. Unfortunately, a side effect is that none of the bigger YouTubers actually make content on the Starfighter modes. A game mode that doesn't get updated is not in the spotlight, especially if there's an almost complete radio silence from the developers and the community team on potential future additions or updates. Just to avoid any misunderstandings, I'm not blaming anyone for not making videos on Starfighter content. It is only logical from their point of view, no news, nothing to report on. The honorable exception is Eckert's Ladder, who did a long video on Starfighter Assault earlier this month. I'll have a link to it in the comments. Still, I think this kinda falls short in terms of the community aspect, because there is actually a lot going on in the Starfighter community, and yes, it's not only us begging the devs for new content. There is a couple of smaller YouTubers making great videos, pilots are active on social media with good feedback, interesting suggestions and great new content ideas. There's fighter squadrons taking part in clan battles, players organize Starfighter community events and more. Also, there's obviously a lot of interesting stuff going on in the Star Wars universe in general that has us pilots interested, like, that movie that comes out in December. So that's where the Starfighter Community Logs will pick up. We will try to give you an overview of all things Starfighter happening on the social medias and such, and get you up to speed what is happening in the Starfighter community. Alright, let's get to it. For this first episode, I thought it was actually a good idea to make the little official news that we do have on the Starfighter modes in Star Wars Battlefront II our very first point of interest. We'll take a closer look what official news is actually out there in the social medias. Well, for a very long time there actually was close to no news updates at all, until last week when community manager Ben Walk finally answered a question about future Starfighter content on the EA forums. And it's bad news, guys, I'm afraid. Very bad news to be precise. So there you have it, the infamous "there is nothing for us to share." Obviously, this was a disappointment. I do, of course, appreciate we finally got an official response, but, part of me was hoping they didn't respond to Starfighter questions, because they actually had something in the making and were waiting for the right time to announce it. I mean, there was a solid case for that in my opinion. Let me elaborate, as I think that might be a surprise for some of you. First, I really think they tried to listen to player feedback and bring it into the game. That's one of the reasons why their live service is a major success story in my opinion. They managed to deliver on so many fan wishes. Take the addition of Capital Supremacy as a mode with a more sandboxy conquest style gameplay compared to the rather linear Galactic Assault, or the removal of the dreaded target system in HEV. Well, I have some experience in working on IT projects, and how they managed this on limited resources is actually really impressive. And they actually delivered most content on time too. Yes, sometimes content got moved to different updates or got delayed a little bit, and yes, there are bugs, indeed there are, and some are really hilarious and some have been here for a very long time, but Still, I think we can agree they do try to incorporate fan feedback and bring player wishes to the game. That's actually the main reason that still made me think we would eventually see new content for Starfighter Assault. Because, there is no shortage of people asking for new content for the space modes in the social medias, for example. Let me actually prove this to you by just showing you a couple of threads on Reddit from the past 3 months. There's a lot on Twitter and the EA forums as well, but let's focus on Reddit for now and let's not drag this video out too long. But I think only the Reddit numbers will speak for themselves. So I think we can agree there is demand for new Starfighter content. And so far the Battlefront Live Service team was always dedicated to answer this type of player feedback with new content. I mean, just look at the heroes and villains, for example, they brought to the game. In my opinion, they added exactly the characters that would get the majority vote if you asked the player base. Or the addition of co-op and instant actions for players who prefer player versus environment content. And I don't know, it just felt strange that all these threads, all these tweets and messages about Starfighter content actually got so little response, if any, from the community team. By the way, sometimes I see people say the lack of messages by the community team on Starfighter topics is, well, caused by personal bias or something. Oh, Ben just doesn't like Starfighter, you know. That is actually not true in my opinion. First, Mr. Walk is a professional who wouldn't let personal opinions get in his way. Second, as you can clearly see, Ben is a man of taste. I mean, someone who played and loved Rogue Squadron and whose favorite spaceship is Boba Fett Slave 1. Well, there's no way the man doesn't like Starfighters. There clearly just isn't anything to announce, just like Ben said in the message on the forums that I showed you earlier. Sadly. But why is that? I mean, why is there nothing to share at the moment? While it certainly isn't exactly promising for the near future, it doesn't rule out new content for the future entirely, or does it? I mean, DICE recently confirmed on several occasions they are dedicated to keep the live service for Battlefront II going. Let me just two examples to prove this. First, we have community manager Ben confirming more content will come beyond the news Rise of Skywalker content. And design director Dennis Branwell actually gave more insight into what might have caused this commitment to Battlefront 2 in an interview with gamesindustry.biz. DICE has been on the sequel treadmill for quite a while. We want to stick with our games a lot longer and want our communities to feel well taken care of. Even DICE's parent company Electronic Arts confirmed this new approach in its Q2 fiscal 20 earnings conference call from October 29th. We want to be careful on some of these other franchises that we give them the long life that they deserve inside our business and can generate great returns for us over a long period of time. Well, we will stick with our games a lot longer. EA will give those games the long life they deserve. Oh, obviously, this is music to my ears, of course, and I'm sure any Battlefront 2 fan will be happy to hear this. But where does the Starfighter community fall in all of this? Well, to say that we feel well taken care of, that wouldn't exactly match, well, what's been happening the past 2 years, and not even talking about new content. Really, some Starfighter bugs have been in the game since, I don't know, day one. So Starfighter content clearly just isn't a priority right now, which is a surprise given the fact that we Starfighter fans clearly are not a small group within the community. I mean, I do understand DICE has limited resources for Battlefront 2 and I do applaud them on what they achieved in other areas of the game. I also understand Criterion made Starfighter Assault and that would probably have to come back to the project to add stuff like new maps. Well, that should not be impossible. I mean, if they made this type of content, Starfighter content, a priority. And I mean, even DICE themselves should be more than capable to actually make new maps for Starfighter Assault. I mean, just look at the beautiful maps they made for the 2015 installment. Again, Starfighter content just doesn't seem to be a priority right now. How do they actually set priorities? I mean, is it social media posts, the community surveys, or what is it? Let me take an educated guess. I have a theory and I think I can back it up with a couple of references from the EA forums. There's one thread and one reply by community manager Ben in particular that actually is worth noting. And while I'm actually not a fan of dissecting his comments letter by letter, I think this one is actually worth looking into it with more care. The thread is actually circling around how bad Starfighter Assault did on Community Survey 13. Yes, it actually is the 13th survey, but I'm not a superstitious person. But still, you know, 13. Oh wow. Be that as it may, there is actually a shorter response I see quoted a lot, so actually let's take a closer look at this one first. Killers F7 said, just curious how many people voted towards new maps for both Starfighter Assault and Extraction maps in the June 2019 community survey. Please don't let Starfighter Assault and Extraction die out. Well, preach, brother. Ben's response was, Starfighter was bottom of the list, smaller scale maps for the likes of Extraction were second bottom. Well, that's not very promising, is it? A bit earlier in the thread, Ben kind of de-emphasized the importance of community survey results though. He said, these surveys are always a good guideline and temperature check, but they are not the definitive source of truth. He did say something very similar actually back in 2018 on Twitter as well. But what is then? I mean, what is the definitive measure when the decisions are made on what content will come to Battlefront 2? A more detailed response on the EA forums actually gives a pretty good idea. Well, let's take a closer look. In terms of metrics upon which decisions are made, it depends entirely on what type of content we are talking about. Well, here we ask about new stuff like new maps. If it's which mode shall we dedicate time on new map towards, as an example, we will look at which game modes people are playing the most. Right now we know the majority of the multiplayer user base is gravitating towards capital supremacy. It's the large-scale battles that the majority want, so that's where the focus is right now. Let's stop with this bit. So, even though we can safely assume community surveys influence content decisions, like mentioned a little earlier, they are not the only source of truth to the community team. In this passage here that I just read for you, Ben actually clearly says what is the other, more important decision influencer, the population of game modes. A little later, he actually re-emphasizes that by saying that number of threads on the forums are of a much smaller value to base decisions on. I actually wonder if his response to thousands of upvotes on Reddit would actually be the same. I mean, I can understand him from some point of view. If you want to have numbers influence your decision process, it has to be clean numbers, of course. I mean, in the example of number of threads or pages in a thread, is this a safe value? Is that unique data? No, probably not. You can't really account for double posts, for example, and there probably is no statistic backend on the forum that actually tells you the number of unique posters on thread, for example. And if you look at Reddit, it's similar. It's also a black box. Yes, if you add all these threads that I linked to you earlier, if you put them all together, you are looking at an impressive 5-digit upvotes, but that's in a couple of threads, all with subtle differences in orientation, and yes, there probably will be double upvotes, but still, even if you crunch these numbers down, a solid number will stand, and that's not going to be a minority. And I actually selected just a few threads as well. There's plenty more of similar topics on the biggest Battlefront 2 community. But yeah, let's come back to the population of game modes. Without a doubt, that is a solid indicator. Also one DICE can probably bull by themselves, and I'm sure they do that on a standard, regular schedule. But I still have a few problems with that. But before I make my point, let me actually show you an older tweet by Ben back in June 2018. Well, what's my point of showing you this? In my opinion, if you base your decision on the population of game modes, you should probably look at the metrics you pulled at a time when the mode was still updated on a fairly regular basis. The fact that to this day I can still find a match of Starfighter Assault without a problem on PS4 tells you a lot more about how great this mode is and how much of a fan favorite it is than the fact that people focus on capital supremacy over GA at the moment, for example. Well, capital supremacy is the mode with new content. Of course people play it more. I mean, co-op is probably a highly frequented mode at the moment too. I mean, of course it is. It's brand new and actually very good as well. Let's go a little further. Out of curiosity, I did a little poll on my Twitter account. I asked people what they would prefer, a new map for Galactic Assault or one for capital supremacy. I mean, the trend is there. I mean, of course, it's not a large sample size, but it is a sentiment I read a couple of times actually. People play stuff that is new in a 2-year-old game. That doesn't mean they necessarily do so because, you know, it's the mode they prefer. But let's come back to Starfighter Assault. I mean, there is still a very solid fanbase for Starfighter Assault. I'm sure DICE data can back that statement up, especially if you take into consideration this mode has not gotten any updates since launch. I mean, yeah, Lando's Falcon is great, but that doesn't count. I mean, it's more of a meme right now. But to come back to the tweet on screen, apparently in June 2018, Starfighter Assault was pretty solid in numbers, otherwise Ben would not have made that statement. So if you base decision about content on game mode population, looking back in time closer to the launch of the game, in my opinion, could give you a better indication for what content would be well received and well played within the player base. I mean, that's all fair, just speculation, but is there actually still hope for new content then? Let's continue with our detective story. I promised I'd give you an update about what news are out there on the social medias. So what about the actual developers? I mean, has there been a small hint or something that can give us hope for future Starfighter content? For this next bit, let's focus on our Lord and Savior Dennis Brandwall, the design director for Battlefront II at DICE Sweden. And as we already looked at the forums and Reddit, let's focus on Twitter for this part of the video. As you may know, Mr. Benwall, aka Dice Firewall, is famous for, well, what should we call it, the occasional Twitter barrage. I mean, he often stays away from social media for months, just to suddenly reappear with tweets and posts on Supercharge. It's always cool. So in the most recent outbursts of tweets and posts, did Starfighter content get mentioned? No, unfortunately not. To the contrary, Dennis' last tweet about Starfighter actually dates back to the near pre-launch of Battlefront 2, and here it is. Oh man, trench run in BF2. Yes sir, that is something we pilots would love very much. I mean, imagine a trench run intermission between two phases of capital supremacy. It's also an original trilogy map, so you know, maybe, but let's not get carried away too much here. So let's better continue with our little investigation and let's stay on Twitter for a little more. What about EA Star Wars, the official channel for everything Star Wars related from Electronic Arts? Nothing on Starfighters, unfortunately, outside of the announcement of triple XP events for the Starfighter modes. And by the way, community team, should you be watching, we pilots would love to have one of those more regularly. I mean, it always helps populate slower servers to Starfighter Assault on Australia or especially on PC. You just get more Starfighter lobbies when these events are on. And it also makes finding a game of Hero Starfighters a much less frustrating experience, so thank you for considering it, you know? Also, just a word of advice, dear viewer, should you ever want to do some Twitter research on Starfighter topics yourself, do yourself a favor, don't look for the keyword Starfighter on the EA Star Wars account. I mean, there is Galaxy of Heroes info in there as well, and well, let's just say they get a lot of ships and trust me, you don't want to know. So last but definitely not least in our little investigation, what about the makers of Starfighter Assault, the wonderful and talented people at Criterion Games? Well, as you can see, unfortunately nothing to report here, I mean at least in terms of hints for the new content. I'm very happy by the way, they kind of retweeted my little appreciation video. I think to this day it's been viewed like 7,000 times I think. Anyway, but if you look at their tweets and if you dig a little deeper and look at the tweets by the actual individual developers themselves, I'm not gonna post all of this here, but it's clear to see these people are so passionate about their work, just as passionate as we players are. It really is such a shame. It seems they won't get the chance to add more to the awesome experience they actually created here for Battlefront 2, especially since it seems the very same thing has repeated itself with Firestorm for Battlefield 5, so I don't know, it's a shame. Anyway, let's hold our breath here for a moment. Guys, clearly you and me, if we talk about Starfighter Assault, we could just get over it and play something else. Yes, of course, we could do that. But personally, I seriously believe this game mode is one of the most immersive, most polished games I ever played. I mean, everything about it, the controls, the levels, the art design, the audio effects, the sound design, just the overall composition, the level progress, all the little details they put into this. It really is a masterpiece in my opinion. And, you know, like Ben said, well, playing the most cinematic space battle experience, playing Starfighter Assault made by Criterion Games is as close as you can get to that in my opinion. And yes, I just want more of it. And it's getting more and more difficult to actually find a match, and not only in Hero Starfighters, that's been dead for a long time due to a couple of really poor design choices. By the way, if you do just one thing, dear dice, just one thing for the mode, remove the player count balancing between rounds. I mean, once the round has started, don't look at the numbers. Let us go 1v4 or 4v1, I don't care, but please, that alone would help so much because, you know, the waiting for players to join is killing the mode. Anyway, let's assume for a moment we won't see any new content for the Starfighter game modes. I know a lot of people who actually still play the mode regularly, and there's quite a few clans and squadrons out there, a lot actually, much more than I thought. But well, you might say, if that is the case, then you know, you guys, we could just arrange something and play the mode with all these people at least, right? Oh, we did, before the introduction of matchmaking actually screwed that. In my squadron, the people I fly with, the Rogue 181st, we did so many fun and friendly clan battles, or even just set up matches amongst ourselves. We called them Civil Wars. It was great fun. It actually gives playing the same maps over and over again a whole new angle if you just get to play them with or against your friends. Seriously, that was so much fun, and I'm by no means, you know, a sweaty competitive player. I don't play games to prove I'm the best or something. But you know, nothing beats a little battle against my squad mates in the Rogue One at 81st. You can even, you know, embark in personal vendettas, and the revenge marker, for example, is one of the many great little mechanics Criterion put in the game, and man, can you get into a personal 1v1 with it so easily thanks to it. And really, so much fun was had with that, especially, you know, with people like you, Laura, or Frankie, or Jaren, should you be watching, my friends. It's been awesome. But sadly, matchmaking made teaming up against or with friends close to impossible. And that's why private servers or games would be so great for us hardcore Starfighter fans. Yes, ideally there would be new content that we can play, but you know, but with private servers we could at least arrange fun events ourselves. I mean, we don't need fancy server parameters, just give us a private lobby we can all join on and play the mode. It would keep the game alive, even if it's dead from a development point of view. Well guys, unfortunately the bad news in this video doesn't end with Ben's initial statement on new Starfighter content. As you can see, they already made their mind up. They're not bringing clans or private games like they do for or have planned for Battlefield 5 to Battlefront 2. I did follow up with a question about private matches, you know, as it was announced for Hero Showdown a while back that you could join a lobby if you can fully fill it, but sadly that never got implemented, and I don't think we have a response if that's still coming to the game. But likewise, Ben didn't reply to this question concerning private matches as well. Oh well guys, but I think it's only accurate that we come back to Ben's original statement on the EA forums from the beginning of the video. As you can see, one can only draw one conclusion from all this information, so here comes the TLDR. Right now, any hope for new Starfighter content is gone. But, you know,
long have I waited.
Also this year happened in the Star Wars universe. And like a very wise Jedi once said, no one's ever really gone. Maybe, just maybe, DICE, Disney and Lucasfilm agreed on the fact that this epic space battle that is teased for episode 9, which seems a key part in the Rise of Skywalker, should come to Battlefront 2. Rebellions are built on hope. And I think we're all born to rebel, right, Mr. Walk? Anyway, let's wrap up this video. There you have it. This is the official news we have on future Starfighter content to this day. Thank you guys so much for watching, and in the next installment of the Starfighter Community Logs, we will take a closer look at smaller channels on YouTube, and I will showcase some great gameplay edits by those smaller YouTubers. And we will announce and get into detail about a core project for the Starfighter Community Logs, the Starfighter Top 5 Plays. So do hit that subscribe button if you're not following my channel yet, so YouTube can ring the bell for you when the next episode of the Starfighter Community Logs go up. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, comment down below with any thoughts you might have, and thank you again for tuning in. This is Rogue Wolf signing out, see you in the next one.